Hey guys, what is going on? It's Fen here again. So this is where we last left off in the previous video. So this is part 2 of part 1 and 2 probably. It depends how long it's going to take. There may be a part 3, but hopefully we'll try and get it done in 2 parts, this being the second. So what we're going to do, we're just going to get right into it. And first things, we're going to model this section here. Now luckily we will be able to most likely use a duplicate of our original, which is at the top here. So I'm just going to remove this from the layer. I'm going to go into the layers and just hide these again. So I'm going to take said duplicated object, I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to move it into somewhat a correct perspective here. I think that looks about right. And then first things we're going to do is we're going to basically adjust some of these points. So I'm going to go into the rectangle selection and I'm going to turn off on the visible elements, and we're going to basically grab these and we're going to move them up to around there. And same with the bottom, we're going to move these down. Now we do need to do a little bit of adjusting, of course, because the bottom is different than the top. So what I'm going to do is going to go into a perspective view and just make sure we don't have certain points selected. We can just kind of gauge that by just dragging it, and if we don't see any other points connected, that's pretty good. So we can go into the side view and just kind of line this up as best as possible, and then the same here, we can grab these and do the same, just drag these across. And then what we need to do is we need to drag and collect all these in the middle, because we do need to scale these out, because this is a much bigger hole than the rest. And same with this hole over here. This hole is a much bigger hole, so again we will have to scale this out, but unfortunately we can't just scale it out right now, simply because we need to give this a bit more room. So we're going to be selecting some geometry on this side, and we're going to go in and make sure we deselect everything that doesn't need to be selected, which is just that one point, luckily enough. And then we're going to bring this out. I'm going to bring it out quite far, and the reason I'm doing this is because we're going to adjust it once we have adjusted this inner circle. So again, I'm going to select all this, zoom right in, and obviously deselect these points that are unnecessary. There we go. So I'm going to bring these out again, and if we look in our perspective, it's pretty much the same thing, except it's just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to a top view, select all of these, so the top and bottom, and I'm going to basically scale it in this view, the top view, but I'm keeping an eye on the perspective here. So scale it out, and you can see something along them lines looks pretty decent, so I'm going to keep that. I'm then going to go back into this top view, and I'm going to just focus on one side. So I'm going to focus on maybe this here. So I'm quite happy with that. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to grab all of these polys on this side and just delete them, and again just get rid of all them by optimizing. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's going to be very difficult to measure from here to there. It's just going to take too much time to get it accurate, when I could just throw it into a symmetry object and do a little bit of symmetrical on it, and it's perfect again, right? So yeah, just utilize things that make sense. No point going above and beyond to do things that, you know, just don't really make sense, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is, by the looks of this, we do need to bring in one edge. So I'm going to grab these edges here and I'm going to bring these in, because they don't need to be excessive in terms of being that far out. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to grab the, I'm not going to grab the knife tool for this occasion. I'm going to grab the live selection tool. Just grab all these, making sure obviously live selection or visible elements is actually turned off. I'm going to do the same on this side, and I'm going to right click and use connect objects, I'm probably going to do it one more time just to see how many points this adds in. That actually looks pretty decent. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab said points, probably about 2 on each side, and then just scale them out slightly, and then grab the inner points and scale them out just a bit more. I'm going to do the same on the top. Grab these 2 points and these 2, right click, not right click actually, go to scale, scale them out a tiny bit, reselect the 2 nearest points and scale them out. And the reason we do this is because we need this kind of flow. So obviously when we drop this into a HyperNerbs, you can see we get a really nice flow instead of just having straight lines. So one special thing that we pretty much have to do is I'm going to grab these, we're going to current state to object, delete that and drag this back out, and then we're going to go to the bottom, because at the bottom it doesn't have a circular thing, so we do need to go in and we do need to basically get rid of that. So I'm going to turn off all the visible elements, select these 4 points, and then use U and Y a bunch of times to select all these polygons. So I'm going to zoom in as well, because there's going to be a few here, and one more, there we go. I'm just going to hit delete. Again, I'm going to go back into the optimize everything, plus it's going to optimize this seam in the middle as well, just to make sure it is actually closed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click once I'm in edge mode and obviously on my model, and go to close polygon hole. Then I'm going to go into the points mode and go into knife, and I really need to deselect all these points first. Going to line, and we're going to connect these 2 up, left to right, and then we're going to use the UL command, and we're going to grab this here. I'm going to right click and hit dissolve, which in turn is going to dissolve the rest of it. Now we do have a very big polygon at the bottom, but it doesn't make any difference simply because it's a flat surface, so we don't need to add any more points in or adjust these points in any way. That is absolutely fine. You could have left the profile of the circle in if you wanted to. It doesn't really make a difference. So looking at this, I would say that is pretty much complete and it looks really good. So yeah, quite happy with that. I don't know what we're going to name it because, well, what is it? I guess sword something. Okay, I have no idea what we're going to name that, but we'll just name it that for now. And then I'm going to grab and I'm going to drop it into our finished, and that is one more thing done. So I'm going to press Ctrl S to save, and then I'm going to go and work on this section here, this I guess you would say blade holder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a cube, bring this up, I'm going to give it 2 segments on each side, go to display and change to wireframe so we can actually see these lines, and we're going to basically just press C to make it editable. And then I'm going to go into the rectangle selection, and I'm just going to grab some of these points and start shaping this basically. And we're going to grab these, bring them down, and luckily enough that actually lines up really well, which is just by luck I suppose. And then what we can do with this is move this down slightly into the center, grab this one and move it to the top, which is just going to give us this nice profile. Now again, what we want to do is actually select all 4 of these and bring them down just so it's symmetrical. We could use a symmetry modifier, but it just feels kind of pointless when it's just a few points we can move. So something like that looks relatively good. So what we're going to do now is go into another perspective, and you can see this is very, very fat, so we're going to just scale this down a little bit, and we do need to bring our other object back just to be able to gauge how fat this is, and yeah, it looks a little thin, so let's do something along along them lines. So we can hide that again. So we know this is the profile for our shape. So what we need to do now is we need to make pretty much the indent for this. So we're going to select these edges and we're going to right click and go to extrude inner. And we're going to extrude this in. I'm going to give it a big fat lip. And then we're going to extrude this upwards. And as we extrude it upwards, we're going to zero it out on the Y, which in turn is going to make it flat. And then all we need to do is go in and adjust some of these points. But it's important that we turn off unavailable elements, so we can select these points, that point and that point, move them up and grab the other point and just scale them out until it looks relatively straight. Doesn't have to be too perfect, because we kind of just want the general profile of it being straight. So what we can do now is we can drop this into a subdivision surface, and we can start adding in these control edges because they are important. So I'm going to right click, go to knife, and we can do this with pretty much just the loop tool. So we're going to add a cut round here to sharpen this edge, one at the top as well, one at the side, and one at the inner side, like so. That looks pretty good. We're also going to drop one down here. We're going to drop one at the top on both sides. I'm going to turn off the subdivision and drop one down here and just one in the middle. Looks really good. And we're going to jump to the other side, of course, and add in a few more that we have missed on this side. So one around here, and by the looks of it, everything else looks relatively good. We've got one missing on this side, or have we? No, it's just the shading, so let me just fix that, turn that off, and that looks pretty good. Let's just turn off the wires and we can see if we've missed anything particular. And that looks okay. Looks sharp in places where it needs to be. The only one issue we have is it's not sharp in the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these points and we're just going to zero them out on the X. Just make sure everything is lined up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use UL to select this loop, and we're going to bevel this by a very small amount, and we're going to add one subdivision in. So now when we smooth this out, you can see we get this nice hard edge, which is, you know, really a good representation of this. So everything with that seems done. So that's another object done. So you can see these objects are quite easy. It just takes a little bit of practice and just a little bit of fiddling, and you can get it working really nice. Now I do think this is a bit thick, but we can adjust it with scale, so it's not a big issue. But we will sort out proportions once we have done. So I'm going to drag and drop this onto here, and we can bring everything back, and you can see this is pretty much what we have so far. So one thing we will have to adjust is this at the top here. So we could do that now. So let's grab this object and trying to figure out where everything is. We're going to go into point modes, and we want to just grab this. So we're going to go to the top view, and as you can see, things can get a little bit hectic, so I'm going to bring everything back, and I'm going to probably just shut off some of the things that I don't particularly need, and let's see, sword attachment, that's the one we need. So I'm going to turn off hypernerbs, and I'm going to bring back the handle, just because we need to kind of use that as what we're going to be scaling to. Once I've got these selected, I can turn the hypernerves back on, which is going to give us a little bit of a different look. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to scale this in until the outermost part basically connects. I can check this from the perspective as well. So just a little bit more. There we go. That looks decent. And then what we can do as well is we can grab all these points on the outer side and we can just scale them in slightly. Actually, I don't think scale will work. See, the problem with scale is you're going to be scaling the bevels as well, which isn't going to work too well. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these and we're going to move them plus 5. So it's going to be -5. So minus 10 and minus 5. Okay, so that's minus 15 in total. So we're going to grab the bottom one, if I can grab it, and then we're going to do plus 15, which is then going to give us the same amount. So we have moved it, but we haven't scaled it, which is important. So that looks really good, and we can then bring back the attachment at the bottom, which is there, and we can actually just scale this. Because we don't have any bevels on this, we'll be able to scale it and it should work pretty fine. So that looks a little better. And you know, scaling does cause a few issues in terms of the size, but I mean, if that is an issue, we can do the same thing. We can go into the points and we can grab all these and we can move it negative, let's say negative 10. And we can do here, we can use plus 10. And then we can have a look again, and that looks a little bit better. We might have to do a little bit more adjusting, but in terms of proportions, that looks about right in my opinion. So I'm going to Control S to save that, go back to layers, turn off these. And then we've just got the sword to complete. So let's get started. For this, I'm actually going to turn to the modeling tab. I'm going to be using the create polygon tool. So we're going to start on one of these corners, and we're going to be symmetry in this, so we just need to work on one side. So we're going to grab this, and we're going to start off with this kind of quad. It's important that we start off with a quad, just because it's going to be much more helpful later on. And we're going to continue these quads down. And the reason we're continuing quads is because it's much easier to work in this fashion than it is to, you know, try and fill everything in and then connect it all up. If you start with quads, you know the flow of quads it's going to continue. So I'm going to continue quads in this section here and connect this up to the center. That's awesome. And then we're going to have an issue here, but before we fill that in, I'm going to basically connect this triangle here, which is going to be the tip of our blade. And as you can see, it's got a little curvature in this, so we're going to be adding that as well. But until then, let's just add in the curvature of this, and then we can fill in the rest of the gaps. So there we go. I'm going to switch back to live selection. I'm going to grab all these down the center, and I'm just going to zero them out on the X and kind of just pull this to the center. And I'm going to grab the knife tool, do a little cut here if I'm in line mode, and then I'll be able to just adjust that slightly because that curvature is important. There we go. So let's connect these up, I suppose. So I'm going to make a big cut across here, a big cut across here, and continue these cuts across. And then I can continue these cuts down. Same with here. And the problem when you get so far out into a tight gap, you can't actually get in, which is kind of annoying, but And then we're going to go down here as well, which will form these two into a big two quads instead of a one 5 or 6-sided polygon, which is something we don't need. So that was actually relatively easy. Let's just tidy up a little bit. So I'm going to grab all these. I'm going to zero them out on the Y, just to make things look a little bit neater. And looking at this, it looks relatively good. We're probably going to add in, I'd say, another edge loop there, and possibly I'm going to say another edge loop. And the reason for that is because we're going to grab the magnet tool, which we're going to start adjusting these points. Make sure the strength is on 100%, and basically adjust these, and we can bring this round, and we just want the curvature to flow. So you see it's flowing around this way, so we want it to flow as well, and that's why we've added extra points in, so we can grab these points and just move them around without any fear of them being too big or too small. And it is just a balancing act. You're not going to get every polygon perfect, but if you at least get them, equal to some regards, then it's just better geometry flow for everybody. Especially when it comes to texturing and stuff like that, it really does help knowing the flow of the polys as well. So looking at this, we've got an end going down here. We do need to make this sharp as well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the knife tool and just put a cut in there. It's just a point, and that's going to basically actually I'm going to do it across. I think that would work relatively well. And I'm going to grab this and bring it down, because this is the center point. We're going to be using that. If I bring this down, we're going to make this into a quad, and then with this one we're going to bring it across. This is going to be in the center, and then we've got this. So we need to cap this off in a sense. So to cap it off, all you do is you bring two edges into one edge, and then you delete said middle edge by dissolving it, and then you pretty much have the same thing down here. So we'll just actually grab this and we'll move it up. So you can see how this works. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 there, so we do need to cap this off. So let's just put a line across there and across there, and there we go, we've fixed it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we do have quads everywhere. So just adding that line in and then adding the extra edges has really helped out. So what I can do is grab these and just move them around slightly, keeping this curvature down into the center, and of course just evening these out as well as we go. And we can just adjust this a little bit, and this is pretty much it. You've just got to adjust, and the more you adjust, the better it will look. So I'm going to bring this down, bring this in a bit, bring this up like so, and that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these edges again, and just be careful when you get further down, and then zero these out. It's important that we zero them out, and then what we can do is we can grab a subdivision surface and put this on, and you can see this looks fantastic. But we're going to run into a problem, and one of the problem is that we need a sharper edge down here. So how do we do that? Well, quite simply, we already have the edge in, so adding another edge in here would cause issues, especially when it comes down to capping it off. We've already got the cap off here, which is basically making this triangle into quads. So instead of messing everything up, what we can actually do is just grab the magnet tool, and all we can do is just drag these edges into this, just to make it as a supporting edge. And if you don't know what a supporting edge is, the closer one edge is to another, the sharper that edge will become. So doing it this way is going to be a lot better. And you can see we've actually got an issue here, so I'm just going to weld these together like so. I'm going to grab this and bring it down again, and one last time. And now if we turn on the hypernerves, you can see we actually get a very sharp edge, which is really good. So all we need to do now is we actually have to just readjust a few of these points, because we took some of them points away. So now we just need to make these a little bit thicker in some areas, and obviously a little bit less in others. So looking at that, it looks relatively good. So again, we're going to use some of these edges depending on the polyflow, because right now this looks actually really good. It looks even with quite big polygons, which is nice. Obviously it gets shorter at the bottom, but that's obviously natural. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the knife tool, and we're going to cut an edge in here, and this edge will keep this very, very sharp. And as you can see, the bottom is already sharp just because of how we modeled it. So in terms of sword preparations, we're pretty much done. All we need to do now is grab these edges, and we're going to extrude them up. But first we're going to zero out the y-axis, and then we're just going to drag this all the way up to around there. And once we've done that, we can grab these edges. We can right click and go to connect points and edges, and we can do this a few times to fill in the polygons that we've got. So maybe one more time. And as you can see, we have a very nice looking sword. So the best thing to do now is to pop this into a symmetry object, and the important thing is to go in and make sure this is set to the right tolerance. So I'm going to try 0.7, and that's actually the magic number, 0.7. That's basically going to give us this look where it's connected in the middle, but it's not overlapping and pinching points and stuff like that. So I'm going to grab the magnet tool, and this area down the bottom is kind of annoying me, so I'm just going to bring this in a little bit, and be sure not to move these points. As you see, I actually moved them. I just probably want to grab the move selection, and it's going to be very difficult to move these, but this one's actually not a problem. But this one will have to be just moved down in the Y. This one we can move in both axes, and that looks relatively good to me. So as you can see, overall this worked out really well, but we're not finished just yet. So what we need to do now is we need to pretty much, in the perspective, hit H and make sure the polygons are not flipped. So as you can see, all these polygons here are actually flipped. So all the blue ones mean they are flipped, so they're inverted. So you need to do is select them, right click and go to reverse normals. If you select all, you'll see that they're all orange and not blue. If you go to the other side, they will be blue. So you just need to look at your axes. Z is pointing that way, so we know this is the front and that they're all the right colour, basically. So now that we've got that, what we need to do is we need to essentially make this into a point. And to do that, what we can do is that there's a few methods we can do. I'm going to grab all the polygons, and they're already zeroed out on the Z, so that's fine. We kind of need to bend this, and I'm not sure what the best method would be to bend this, but I guess we can just kind of play around. So I'm going to grab these, I'm going to go current state to object, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to drop this, once I turn on edge lines, drop this into the subdivision surface and just name this blade. So once we've got that, we just need to pretty much select the middle edge and kind of take it out a little bit. And the problem is that we might be better off using a modifier for this. I'm not quite sure if this is going to work, but I guess we could give it a try. Now I'm not sure which one we really want to be using. I'd say bend, but I don't know. Let's just use bend, and see how this works, I suppose. Okay, so let's do the strength. We don't want that way. We want, let's do half of that, I suppose, which is going to be about there. And if we bend that, and it's actually, let's do within box. So what's happening here is it's not giving us the right angle. We want it to be, I suppose that's not going to work. Okay, so bend isn't going to work. I'm trying to think of the easiest way to bend this, and the reason I'm thinking to bend it is because in here we've got obviously our hard edge, and then it should taper off into, I don't know, well, whatever else, it should taper off a little bit. Let's just try this method, I suppose. I'm going to select all the middle points, and that has to be hard, so converting to edges, and we're going to right click and go to bevel. We're going to bevel that out to be probably 0.4, and 1 should be enough. I think actually 0.4 is a bit too much. Let's do 0.2. There we go. And that's pretty much our hard edge. So what we need to do now is we need to, I think we may be able to rotate these. I suppose we could just check. Let's grab all of these, and it would be easier to just grab the rectangle tool, and let's move the axes over to the center, and then let's just rotate these around. How many degrees do we want? Let's have a look from the top perspective. So we probably want about 5. Nope. And that's kind of annoying. So what I need to do is I need to go into, let's say, mode, where is it, modeling, and quantize, and rotation. We need to put this to, let's put it to 1, and then we can rotate this again, which is going to give us a 5 degree. I think maybe, see, I'm not sure on the angle. I could say 2, which just seems a little bit too little. So let me do 3, and then that's a total of 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save this selection. So I'm going to go selection, set selection. I'm going to name this left. I'm going to deselect, select it again, and then I'm going to basically grab the rest of these like so. I'm going to move the axes tool to the center, and I'm then going to grab the rotation tool and rotate that again to 5, and we should have something like that, which I think looks relatively good. So I guess the thing we should really do now is just mirror this, or use symmetry, and then we need to adjust the axes, of course. And again, we do have quantize on, so let's just turn that off, just so we can get this a little bit accurate. And then we can go into the symmetry and put this up to 0.7. It's a little bit too much. 0.3. That worked out really well. Let's just double check that. Nope, still actually not working out too good. Let's just bring this in a bit, I suppose. And we can really, it's kind of annoying because now this is overlapping, but it wasn't overlapping, so we need to kind of figure out what we're doing. Oh, and I know why. It's because of the bottom, and the bottom is basically saying yes, we're going to be overlapping, so these points here are actually overlapping, but the top points aren't, so that's fine. So we can adjust that quite easily. Making this is actually a little bit more difficult than I expected. I didn't actually fully complete the sword in the trial run that I did, but we're getting there. It's nice to troubleshoot in tutorials. So by the looks of it, that looks fine, I suppose. And what we can do now is go into the edges with the live selection tool and just kind of move these back. Not in that mode though. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go step by step, I suppose, by the looks of it. I'm going to have to grab both of these, and then I'm going to have to bring these in together to kind of form this, which is going to take a little while by the looks of it, unless we can do multiple at a time. Which I suppose we can actually. So let's grab the rest of these, like so. And we've got a few more. And then we can just grab these and find the bloody axis tool, which is all the way up there. And then we can just drag these in together. That's fine. And then what we can do is we can go down to the front as well, and we can select all these to a certain degree. And apologies if you hear some noise. My neighbours are awake, and yeah, let's just not go into that, but they're loud. So we're going to bring these points in. We're going to deselect. And we're going to keep doing that by bringing these in. And I'm not being super accurate right now. The reason is because we can probably sort out the rest of it with tolerance, with the symmetry modifier. So that's not a big issue. And what we're doing is we're just slowly bringing these in. Now the ones that we haven't brought in look completely weird, which is understandable. But we will be fixing that. Let's get rid of that. Is that the right one? Yep. That and that. Then we've got two more, which we can just slightly bring in. And then what we can do is we can grab the rest of this, which is pretty much that by the looks of it. And I think we may need, let's just grab this entire section here and see what's happening. We don't need that or that, but we can bring these in, and we actually just need the side ones. We don't need that, or that, but we do need that. And then we can grab these and just bring them in ever so slightly. Deselect that one and that one and bring these into the connected. Sweet. Now yes, we do have an issue here which we're going to sort out now. So it's about just tapering this off manually, so bringing your edges in. So of course we will need these edges here, and maybe turning select visible elements off might work wonders here. And again, we're just going to taper this in slightly, making sure that we've got everything, and then bringing that in, trying to keep the contours of this as accurate as possible. Like so. Grab these points, bring them in slightly, bring this point in slightly, and we're going to have to bring some of these points in as well, just to kind of keep the flow proper, which looks alright. We can grab this and just bring this in slightly, and it's kind of annoying that it doesn't select everything, but unfortunately this is pretty much what it's like. Let's just turn that off because it's kind of annoying now. And select all them, bring that in, so we can turn on hyper nerves. We can kind of see what this looks like. It looks actually okay. It's really, really cool. So what we can do right now is we can play with the tolerance here. We can put this maybe to 0.2, not enough. Let's do 0.5, get in there. We just need to make sure that we're not having any issues up here, which it seems we are, with overlapping areas. So let's put this down to 0.2, which still isn't enough for that. 0.3, there we go. So 0.3 is kind of perfect. So all we need to do now is a little bit more manual work, just by dragging these in, and that they will snap together. And yes, I really understand that this is a pain, and that there may be a better way of doing it. I hope there is. And if you've got any suggestions, you can always leave that suggestion. And maybe we can find just an easier way of doing this. Now I think all these are like that, which they are, so that's fine. We can just adjust that, but let's just adjust this side first. Let's grab these and just move them in, just so they snap, like so. And then these two, and our goal here is just to get them to snap together, which is sometimes easier said than done. There we go, and bring these down, and then we can bring these together and they can snap, and that looks snazzy. Although we do have a bit of an issue here where this does need to come out slightly, like so, and bring this in, bring that out slightly. Looks alright. I think we brought these edges in just a little too much. But again, that is to hold the hard edge, so it is kind of understandable that we did bring it in, but we don't want it in too far. And again, just bringing these together and adjusting where necessary. There we go. So that's all fine. That looks all fine. Go to the other edge, and I really do understand that this is taking quite a while. I'm tempted to just kind of stop the recording and do it, but I want to show you in real time pretty much, how we're fixing this issue and any other issues we may run into along the way. We're just going to be adjusting these like so. So on this side we're actually just selecting the outer edge and pulling them out. We're not actually moving both edges, which saves us moving them back. On some of them though we will have to move them out because it just looks a little bit weird. But overall this is looking a lot better, and of course that edge is already done. So you can see we've got kind of a point here which isn't what we want, so we can just bring this out like so, just to keep the contours of this straight. Looks alright. We can grab this one and bring that out, this one, and it is just a balancing act. It's kind of keeping all these together. So now that we've got that complete, what we can do is we can go grab, is it from this side? I think it's this one. Let's have a look. And it's a little bit annoying to kind of get in on the action. So it's actually the second one down, which is that one. Okay, so let's select all of these all the way up. And we're going to be adjusting these all together, which just is going to save a little bit of time. And find the point here, and we're just going to adjust these ever so slightly to bring them all together, which is kind of nice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on the hyper nerves. I'm going to turn off the edge shading, and I'm going to right click on this and go to Cinema 4D tags and put on a thong tag. And the reason I put that on is because they don't come by default with the create polygon. So I'm looking at all these edges and they all look relatively decent actually. The tip of the sword looks a little too fat to me. So what I'm going to do from a side view, I'm going to select these polygons, well not polygons but points. I'm just going to scale it a little bit. Now need to be careful not to scale too much, because as you can see, and we might run into an issue where we do have to readjust. And readjusting just means more time. So having a look here, that looks all okay. Let's just double check. Whoops. That looks a bit better. We do still have a bit of a bulge around this area, which is just a bit further up, and that's natural. And the reason that's natural is because it just needs to be adjusted to kind of give the conforms of this. Because basically what we're trying to do is taper it off into a nice small pointy bit, I suppose. So having it quite fat in some areas isn't really going to work. So we just need to gradually move each set of points in, which is then going to give us the pointiness. And it only has to be a fraction, because this is all in the illusion that this is a sword, because obviously it doesn't exist. It's in a virtual world. So looking at that now, it looks a lot better. And we still have the pointy edge down the middle. We have, you know, a very sharp edge, and everything looks really, really cool. So with that being said, I'm going to switch back to the startup. I'm going to add this to our finished, bring everything back, and drop the material on everything we've created. And my voice is going. So I'm going to go to File and Save, and just give this a quick render, and we can kind of see the finished results. So looking at that, it looks really, really cool actually. Some of the proportions could be a little bit better. I may do another video showing adjustments to the model, because right now it just looks a little bit out of proportion. I think it's the blade length. I think it just looks a little bit too short to be, considering how long the handle is, and the blade itself just looks a little bit too short, so we may do some final adjustments. But overall, this has been part 2 of the modelling stage, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know it took a little bit longer than the last video, most likely. I haven't checked how long we've been recording, but yeah. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.